All right, we're gonna start this week's video out with a little bit of routine maintenance. Now, this is pretty easy stuff here. What we're gonna be doing is we're just gonna be flushing and descaling our tankless water heater. Now, don't get me wrong. If you wanna pay me to do this, I'll gladly take your money. But this is definitely something that the average RV owner can do as long as you're physically able to do it. What we've got here is a pretty basic setup. We've got a pump, we've got some hoses so that we can route that water to and from the water heater. And then we've got a bucket. Basically, what we're gonna do with this is we're gonna fill this with about 2 gallons of just white distilled vinegar that you can get at pretty much any grocery store. That's all we really need to get this done. The way this is gonna work, we're gonna fill the bucket with 2 gallons of vinegar. Then we're gonna set up this pump assembly so that it draws this vinegar from the bucket, takes it up to the water heater, through that heat exchanger, and then back into the bucket. And we're just gonna let it circulate for about 45 minutes. So why do we need to do this every year? More often than not, that water that's coming into your RV is full of all kinds of minerals and deposits, specifically calcium and magnesium, and especially if you're not using a water softener and a good filtration system. And over time, that calcium and magnesium is just going to continue to build up inside of that heat exchanger in the water heater, and that's going to affect all kinds of things. Mostly it's going to affect the amount of flow that goes through that water heater, and it's going to affect the ability of that heat exchanger to actually take the heat that's being produced by that propane flame and then put that heat into your water that you want for your shower. And some of the things that you might notice inside of your RV that will tell you that it's time to do this is, it could be a number of things, but number one, if your water heater isn't igniting properly, this could be the issue. It could just be dirty inside. If you're getting reduced flow from your hot water tap, it could be because you got a bunch of buildup inside of that heat exchanger. And then of course, if you're just not getting hot water like you would expect, again, it could be because that heat exchanger is dirty and it's not able to do its job. So again, this is a pretty simple setup. This is all we really need here. Now, just realize that there are different types of pumps that you can get out here. This is just an AC powered pump, but you can get DC powered pumps, you can get submersible pumps. This here is not a submersible pump. I bought this one for a couple of different reasons. So number one, it's so that I can do these types of jobs. But number two, it also provides me a little bit of a backup if our onboard pump ever goes out. I can easily put this thing in the place of that onboard pump and just plug it straight into an AC outlet, and then I've got water again. So it kind of serves a dual purpose for me. I will put a link to all this stuff down in the description below if you want to build your own kit here to do this simple DIY maintenance. You can check that stuff out again down in the description below. All right, so that's it. Let's go ahead and get everything set up in here, and I'll show you exactly how I set this whole system up and routing the hoses and all that good stuff. All right, so the first thing we want to do here is just turn water off to the rig. That's the easiest thing to do. And then turn on one of your hot water faucets in the rig to just depressurize the whole system. That way, when we break these connections back here on the back of the water heater, we don't get water spraying everywhere. That's the last thing we want to do. And then the idea here is that we are gonna take those hoses that I showed and we're gonna go ahead and hook those up to the back of the water heater. And what we wanna do is take the hose that's coming from the pump that's gonna supply the water, and we wanna hook that up to our cold water inlet on the back of the water heater. And then we're gonna take one of the other hoses and we're gonna hook it up to the hot water outlet. And basically what that's gonna allow us to do is send water from the pump into the cold water inlet. It'll go through that heat exchanger and then come out the hot water line, and it'll return back to the bucket. Now, one thing that I wasn't smart enough to think about beforehand was the adapter that I got here for the hose. So this is basically a 1/2-inch female NPT thread. To the other side is barbed, and I've just put this together using these hose clamps. Now, if this was a permanent installation in my rig, I probably wouldn't use a hose clamp. I would probably use the pinch clamps that you see all over your RV in the plumbing system, but this is what I use because it's a little bit cheaper, and I really am not worried about this leaking over time. But the part that I failed to think about was I didn't get the kind that you could still spin on this end. this end right here, this came with the pump, and you can see this one spins. Well, I should have done the same thing for the other end, because I've got this 10-foot section of hose that I gotta get onto the water heater here, and I'm gonna have to spin the whole hose to do that. So when I put all of the pieces and parts down in the description area here, I will put the kind that you can still spin once you get it attached to your hose. And then one thing I would recommend doing here, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but I got a towel down here up underneath these connections. That way, when I break these connections, any water that comes out, you know, will be caught on the towel. All right, there's the first one all hooked up. Where you route this hose and wherever you set up your pump is gonna just be determined by the setup of your RV. But I've got 10 feet of hose here that, like I said, I'm just gonna route out of the pass-through, and we'll get it set up into that bucket. So I decided that since I have enough of this hose, I just routed the hose all the way through the pass-through over to the passenger side, and that's where I got my bucket set up and all my vinegar and my pump. So let's just take a quick look at how this is gonna work. So this is the cold water inlet to the water heater. And again, we just wanna hook this up to the outlet side. I'm bleeding from something. There we go, got a nice tight connection there. Okay, on the inlet side of this pump, we've just got this hose going down into the bucket, and this is what's gonna draw that vinegar up. And it's gonna go through the pump, it's gonna go through that cold water connection through there, it's gonna go through the heat exchanger, and then back into the bucket, and it's just gonna be a circulating loop like that for about 45 minutes. And I actually like this setup on this side because I can kind of keep an eye in there and just make sure that I don't spring a leak on any of my connections. Now for this vinegar, so my water heater is probably fairly clean, so I'm only gonna use about 2 gallons. The dirtier your water heater is, or the longer it's been, the more buildup that's gonna be in there. And you may wanna use 3, maybe even 4 gallons of this vinegar, but because I think mine's pretty clean still, I'm just gonna use 2 of these gallons. And we're ready to start up this pump. So all I gotta do is, for this one, all I gotta do is just plug it in and it'll start up right away. And here we go. So there we go. We can see we got a nice flow of vinegar through the whole system, and we're gonna let this go for about 45 minutes. And I don't see any leaks back there. So when this 45 minutes is up, we'll replace this vinegar with fresh water and we'll just rinse the whole system out. All right, so full disclosure on this. Remember when I said the first step is to turn the water off and depressurize the system? Well, what should go along with that is also turning off the water heater itself, because as soon as you put flow through that water heater, it's gonna start up and start heating up that vinegar. And so this thing probably ran for a couple of minutes while the water heater was on before I realized what was going on. I don't think it's gonna hurt anything. It didn't run that long with the water heater on. So just remember that. Turn the water heater off before you start putting water through it. Okay, we've been going about 45 minutes here, so I'm gonna wrap this up. So I just need to get rid of all of this vinegar. So what I'm gonna do is number one, I'm just gonna dump the vinegar out in this gravel parking lot that I'm in right now. It's not gonna hurt anything. It's perfectly safe for the environment. And then I'm just gonna take the pump and I'm just gonna shoot whatever is in the hose out into the gravel parking lot. And then what we'll do is we'll refill this bucket with just fresh water. We're gonna recirculate that for a couple of minutes. And then what we'll do is we'll wrap all of this up. I'll get everything connected back up the way it's supposed to be, put the water heater back online, and then we'll go inside. Before we turn that water heater back on, we'll go back inside. We'll turn the hot water on inside at one of the faucets, and we'll just continue to purge what's in that line. Once we no longer smell that vinegar coming out of there, then we can turn that water heater back on and use it normally. and we don't want to run that pump dry for too long, just to protect the internal components. It says it's okay to run dry, but I just wouldn't do it for very long. So we got most of the vinegar out of the system, so I'm going to go fill this thing up with water. And basically what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to stick the suction into this pump into that bucket, and then I'm just going to shoot fresh water out into the driveway until all of that water is gone, and then we'll go flush it from the inside. There we go. And for reference, this is a 16 quart or 15 liter bucket, and I had it full for my flushing. So we put about 15 liters through there. Should be good to go. So I'm gonna get everything hooked back up in here. I'm not gonna show that because it's just the opposite of what I did. And then we'll go flush it from inside and see if we can smell any vinegar. So the good thing about all of this, right, is it's vinegar. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing that's gonna hurt you about vinegar. So, you know, if you get in there, even after you do all these flushings and you later smell vinegar in your water, it's not that big a deal. Water might taste a little funny, but it's not gonna hurt you. All right, and the last step here is, again, we're just gonna flush this through the lines inside. Let this probably go for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and make sure it doesn't smell like vinegar. If it is, we'll just let it run until it doesn't smell like vinegar anymore. But essentially, that's it. Once I no longer smell vinegar coming out of here, then we can turn that water heater back on and everything is back to normal. So that's gonna wrap it up for that little easy DIY maintenance. One final thought here though, and I don't think I mentioned it earlier, is this pump came with a small inline filter, and we don't wanna use that when we're doing this maintenance, because when all of that stuff, if you got a bunch of buildup inside of your water heater, and all that stuff comes out, especially if it comes out in big chunks, it's basically just gonna clog this filter up quickly, and then your pump's not going to be able to pump the water through, and it's going to overheat. So no filter when you're using that pump to do this maintenance. There's no reason to. Actually, one last thing here, and you can see these clouds are moving in, and it's actually starting to rain right now. So I'm not going to actually do this, but if you look down in here in your tankless water heater, there's going to be a small inline filter. This thing, just make sure you have the water off and unscrew that, pull that little filter out, check it for any debris or anything. If it needs to be cleaned, clean it out, and then put it right back in. And then that really is the last part of this. I promise I'm gonna get out of this rain because it's really starting to come down.